so you don't need the video on. We'll have a little question session at the end, and that's how we'll do it. Stop my video and Om Gyanatimandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chukshushan Miladam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tenamani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaudavani Prashani Nirvisheshashan Navari Pashtadishtarne Bandeyaham Shri Guru Shidita Padkamana Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagadujatam Shahagana Rangnatam Tam Shajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parichan Shaitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shibishakam Vitangscha Mantra Guru Ajota Shika Guru Gontar Charane Age Gauriya Bandhan Banchakal Petrubhishta Kripashan Deveva Chapatitanam Pavne Bhavashim Mahashila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So we're going to be discussing the Rupshika, which is an important section of the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We will find in the 19th chapter of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Now, for this seminar, we will also be presenting to you some of the preceding events which led up to the Rupshika, and that will help us to get a better understanding of the pastimes and the Mahaprabhu's meeting with Rupa and Sanatan. So we'll begin today. We're going to be talking a little bit about Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri before he even made his attempt to go to Vrindavan and thus meet Rupa and Sanatan. So we're going right back to Mahaprabhu arriving in Jagannath Puri after his South Indian tour. We'll discuss that today. And then Mahaprabhu, in the next session, he, in an attempt to go to Vrindavan, he actually goes back to Bengal and all the way up the Ganga to Ramkeli, and there he visits Rupa. He meets with Rupa and Sanatan. And then subsequently he returns to Jagannath Puri, and then he eventually goes to Vrindavan. And on the way back, he meets Rupa Goswami at Prayag, and it begins the actual teachings, which we'll discuss in the third section, Bhakti Lota Bij, and then Rasa Tattva. So there'll be two sessions that we'll present on the actual Rupshika teachings. And the first two sessions will be the events that were leading up to Mahaprabhu's meeting Rupa Goswami in Allahabad. So if you have questions, you could ask questions as we go. If you like, you can raise your hand. There should be a facility for raising hands somewhere, perhaps.
There is.
Yeah, so you can, if you have questions, or occasionally I'll have a little break, and if there's questions, we can take questions, and that way we'll make it a little interactive, but not that much under the circumstances. And occasionally I'll pop in there but not so much, because I mentioned the lighting's not good here. Okay, so we're good with that. Okay, now Mahaprabhu, he arrived in Jagannath Puri. The circumstances leading up to Mahaprabhu going to Jagannath Puri are in themselves the topic of a whole seminar. Mahaprabhu's sannyas, leaving Mayapur, and then going to Jagannath Puri. Actually, his plan, upon taking sannyas, his plan was to go to Vrindavan. Even way back when Mahaprabhu, he took when he took initiation from Vishwarapuri in Gaya, and this is probably at least 4 years before taking sannyas. After initiation, he remained in Mayapur another 4 years and performed Sankirtan with the devotees. So even at that time, he wanted to go to Vrindavan, and he even left from Gaya, and he headed for Vrindavan, and he wasn't planning on going back to Mayapur. He was prepared at that time to renounce everything. And there was a voice in the sky as he was wandering through the district of Gaya and heading for Vrindavan. The voice said, "You can't go to Vrindavan now. You got to go back to Mayapur. You got so much to do. You're the Supreme Personality of Godhead." So Mahaprabhu, oh, okay. He was so much overwhelmed with love of God that he forgot he was God. That's Chaitanya Avatar. He's so much in love with Krishna. He's experiencing so much love for Krishna that he doesn't even think, he forgets he's Krishna. And he's racing off in the middle of the night, and then the voice says, "No, you're actually, you're God. You're Krishna." He remembers you have so many things to do. So he goes back to Mayapur. And then there's 4 years where so many important things Mahaprabhu did after taking initiation. And he started the Sankirtan movement in the Kirtan in the house of Srivas Thakur. And then he spread chanting of Hare Krishna all through Nadia. Shikaniye Shab Nadiye Fichin Neche Gornitai Radha Krishna Bol Bolore Shabai. He personally preached with Lord Nityananda Prabhu. He ordered Lord Nityananda and Haridas Thakur to begin the preaching movement. Lord Nityananda wasn't preaching up until receiving the order. Even Lord Nityananda came, the Panchatattva were all assembled in Mayapur. They were performing Sankirtan for 1 year in the house of Srivas Thakur. And then Mahaprabhu, he inaugurated the preaching. Shuno Shuno Nityananda Shuno Haridas Shavatra Amara Gai Koroho Prakash. Prati Gore Gore Gi Koro E Bhikha Bhaja Krishna Bala Krishna Koro Krishna Shikha. He ordered Nityananda Prabhu and Haridas Thakur to begin the preaching and spreading the holy name. Up to that point, the preaching was not systematic. Nityananda Prabhu wasn't preaching. Panchatattva weren't preaching. Mahaprabhu occasionally spoke a little. But that was the actual beginning of the formal preaching movement. And then there was preaching in Navadip. Mahaprabhu delivered many extraordinary personalities like Jagai Madhai, Chand Kasi, and others. And in this way, the preaching began. Then Mahaprabhu decided to take sannyas in order to further expand the preaching and be able to travel, because he had plans. His mission is to spread the holy name. Kali Juge Nam Rupe Krishna, Kali Juge Jugadharma Namera Prochar Toti Lage Pita Borna Chaitanya Avatar. He appeared in the yellowish form as Chaitanya Avatar in order to Namera Prochar, in order to personally preach. So after taking sannyas, Mahaprabhu, he wanted to go to Vrindavan, but Sachimata and the other devotees in Navadip, they held Mahaprabhu in Shantipur for a week, and there was a festival every day of chanting, and Sachimata was cooking. And then Sachimata, she requested, everyone from Navadip came to Shantipur to see Mahaprabhu. He left Navadip in the middle of the night, went to Katwa, took sannyas, and then he wandered off to go to Vrindavan. And Nityananda Prabhu tricked him, brought him to Shantipur, and there all the Navadip devotees who were completely devastated that Sachinandan had left Navadip, taken sannyas. So they all went to Shantipur to be able to spend some time with Mahaprabhu. So Sachimata, at that time, she said, please, you don't do like Vishwarup. Vishwarup was Mahaprabhu's elder brother. He's 9 years older, 10 years older. He's Nityananda Prakash, Vishwarup. He took sannyas when Sachinandan was young, when he was 6 or 7 years old. He took sannyas, the elder brother. Actually, Sachimata had daughters also, and they all passed away. That's another story. And then the eldest son, Vishwarup, he took sannyas. And then Sachimata said, don't do like Vishwarup, who took sannyas, and we never heard anything from him again. So you go to Jagannath Puri, because in Jagannath, Krishna is there in Jagannath Puri. Lord Jagannath and Krishna are non-different. So you'll be in Vrindavan Bhav, you'll be in Gopi Bhav in Puri. So it's like you're in Vrindavan. But because many Bengali devotees, they go to Jagannath Puri to see Lord Jagannath. And many Oriya devotees, they go to Bengal to take bath in the Ganga. So in this way, they'll be coming and going from devotees. And in that way, I'll get news of you, and I'll be able to sustain my life. So Mahaprabhu, he agreed to this request, and he went to Jagannath Puri. Now, what's interesting is that even though he was meditating the whole time on Vrindavan, Mahaprabhu immediately, he started preaching in Jagannath Puri, and the first person he delivered was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was the guru of the king. So that made a very big impact on Jagannath Puri. In fact, it mentions that all of the devotees of Lord Jagannath in Puri, they began chanting Hare Krishna. Although they were devotees, they weren't chanting Hare Krishna, but they began chanting Hare Krishna when after Mahaprabhu delivered Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And then he didn't remain in Puri, which is significant because all the time he's thinking about Krishna and Vrindavan, and he goes to Puri, which is non-different, but he doesn't remain in Puri. He only remains in Puri for about a month and a half after arriving there, and then he goes to South India. He leaves Puri for South India and travels in South India and preaches for 2 years. And then what we're going to, our seminar topic today, it will begin when Mahaprabhu returns back from South India, having returned back after 2 years of preaching in South India. That the South Indian tour in itself is another very wonderful leela, which can be discussed at a later time, Mahaprabhu's South Indian tour. So he returned back, and then he returned back just a little bit before Ratha Yatra. He returned. He's been away for 2 years. He arrived around Gorpanima, and then he remained for about a month. He left Jagannath Puri. He was away for 2 years, and then he arrived back 2 years later in the middle of the year, around June, July, just around the time of Ratha Yatra. So Mahaprabhu, I'll read to you some of the Bengali verses, and we'll discuss as we go. Snan jatra deki Prabhu hoilo boro shuk. He come back from the South India, and boro shuk, he became very happy when Snan jatra deki, when he saw the Snan Yatra ceremony of Lord Jagannath. Ishvarer anabarsher poilo boroduk. But when he saw the Anavarsha, that's the period after Snan Yatra where Lord Jagannath goes into retirement for 15 days and his body is painted again, and he's given the herbal remedies and the ginger tea and all that. That's called Ishvarer Anavarsha. That's the 14-day period. Poilo Boroduk. So during that period, Boroduk, Mahaprabhu was very unhappy. You can just imagine Jagannath Puri. Can you imagine what the mood in Jagannath Puri during the Anavarsha after Snan Yatra? All the devotees are completely devastated because there's no other shelter for them. The temple's closed, and they can't take darshan of Lord Jagannath for that 15-day period. The Ratha Yatra ceremony that comes after this Anavarsha period. Now, Mahaprabhu, because he was unable to tolerate the separation from Jagannath, he left Puri, and he visited the place called Alalanath Mandir. That's down here. You can see there's 20 kilometers south of Puri. Here, Alalanath, and there's a beautiful temple. So in that temple, Mahaprabhu would get some relief from his separation from Jagannath. Gopi Bhave, Birahe, Prabhu Byakul Hoy. Alalanath Gelo Prabhu, Shabai Charya. So Shabai Charya, he abandoned all of the devotees in Puri. Alalanath Gelo, he went to Alalanath and Gopi Bhav. There he, Birahe, in separation, he remained in Alalanath. The deity there is very special. It's a four-arm form of Lord Vishnu, but you can see that there's a special feature in this hand. Usually Lord Vishnu is displaying the different weapons, the Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma, the disc, the conch, the lotus, and the club. But here, Lord Vishnu, one of the hands, he has a benediction mudra. He's showing this with his right hand here. He's giving a benediction mudra. So this actually is a deity of Krishna, yeah. The deity of Krishna, Janardhan Krishna. And Mahaprabhu, he worshipped that deity during the Anavarsha period. And there's a stone there. Perhaps some of you have been to Alalanath near Jagannath Puri. There's a stone that Mahaprabhu would lay down upon to pay obeisances, and that stone is there. It's called the Prem Shila. And the imprint of Mahaprabhu's body is still on that stone as he would lie down in his ecstasy. Now, Mahaprabhu being in Alalanath, the devotees in Puri were very much distraught that he's not here. He's come and he came back from South India, but he's gone again. So they were wondering how they can get Mahaprabhu to come back from Alalanath. And what they did was they sent, this is very interesting how they were able to get Mahaprabhu to come back from Alalanath. They sent a group of devotees, and those devotees, they didn't say, oh, you have to come back to Puri, or please come back to Puri, or the king wants you to come back to Puri, or everyone wants you to come back to Puri. They didn't say that. All they said was this. They said that Pache Prabhu Nikat Oilo Bhaktagan, that means that they came close to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Nikat Oilo means they came close, Bhaktagan, the devotees. And all they did was they said, Gauda Hoite Bhakta Aishe Koile Nibidon. Koile Nibidon means that we're humbly submitting Nibidon, like Naibedda in Puja, Naibedda. So Nibidon means a humble submission. All they said was, Gauda Hoite Bhakta Aishe. Gauda means Bengal. And why it's called Bengal, we'll explain a little later. Why Bengal is called Gauda, we'll explain a little later. But all those devotees, they came from Puri, they went to Alalanath, they came into the association of Mahaprabhu. All they said was that Gauda Hoite Bhakta Aishe. The devotees are arriving from Bengal. Now, just try to understand consider the condition of the devotees in Navadip, that first of all, Mahaprabhu's sannyas was such a shock to them. And then they were thinking that, well, at least we'll be able to see Mahaprabhu, if we go to Jagannath Puri, and we'll get information from him. But he didn't stay in Jagannath Puri. He just left. And as he's traveling in South India, there's no WhatsApp or, blog or his web page, his Facebook page. It's complete, no news, nothing. It's just gone. Mahaprabhu's just disappeared from their report. I mean, of course, he's in their heart. But so this was the condition. So when Mahaprabhu arrived in Puri after his South Indian tour, immediately they sent devotees to Bengal to inform the Navadip devotees that Mahaprabhu had returned from South India and is back in Puri. Who they sent? They sent that devotee named KRSNA Das, who was accompanying Mahaprabhu in South India, and he got carried away by the gypsy women. And when Mahaprabhu and he returned to Puri, Mahaprabhu rejected him and sent him away. And so Nityananda Prabhu, Mukunda Datta, Damodar Pandit, and Jagadananda Pandit, who accompanied Mahaprabhu when he took sannyas and accompanied him to Puri, they stayed there for that 2-year period. And they were there when he arrived back. And then they thought, well, what can we do for Krishnadas? Let's send him to Navadip. And in that way, the Navadip devotees will be informed that Mahaprabhu has come back from South India, and immediately they'll be relieved, of course. And they got the news, and the 200 devotees immediately arranged from Bengal, Navadip, under the tour guide of Shivananda Sain. They journeyed to Jagannath Puri. This is the first time that they journeyed to Jagannath Puri. So the devotees who wanted to bring Mahaprabhu back to Puri, being in Alalanath, all they said was that the devotees are coming from Bengal. And immediately hearing that, Mahaprabhu, he came back from Alalanath and came back to Jagannath Puri. So the king of Puri, Pratapuruja Maharaj, he was very much distraught because he wasn't there when Mahaprabhu first arrived in Puri. He wasn't there, so he didn't see Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu went off and went on the South Indian tour. And so he was, requesting Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, how can you arrange a meeting for me to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And just at that time, when the king was discussing with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who is his guru, at that time, then the news that the devotees had arrived from Navadip, that news was brought to the king by Gopinathacharya, who is the brother-in-law of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and he's also from Navadip. He's a Bengali. Gauda Hoite. So he announced to Prataparuja Maharaj and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Gauda Hoite, Vaishnav, Ashayachin, Duishota. That means Duishota means 200. So Gauda Hoite means from Bengal, Gauda Hoite, the Vaishnav, the devotees have arrived, 200 of them. Mahaprabhu Bhakti Shop, Maha Bhagavata. These devotees are all devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and they're all greatly advanced, highly advanced, liberated souls. So in this way, the Bengali devotees are announced to the king. And he mentions that they are all waiting on the bank of the Narendra Sarovar. And so the Bengali devotees are all there, arrived at the bank of Narendra Sarovar, which is one lake where the devotees, when they first arrive in Puri, and particularly from Bengal, then they go to Narendra Sarovar Lake and they take bath there, and they're all waiting there. So any question at this point? Any question? Oh, is that a hand up? It looks like a hand up.
Please unmute yourself if you have any question and ask Prabhuji a question. Yeah. Unmute yourself.
Yes, Prabhu, I have one question, please. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Why was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu so severe on that disciple that was captured by the gypsy women? He came to show mercy to the fallen souls. Why didn't he show mercy?
That's a good question. Good question. Yeah, thanks for listening attentively. Now, you see, there's different moods that Mahaprabhu demonstrates. There's different moods. Like, for example, this whole experience here with the king of Puri, as we know, you know, that he wants everyone to become devotee. He wants to spread the holy name. He's the Param Karuna avatar. He's the most merciful incarnation. But you know, you can see his dealings with Prataparuja Maharaj. The devotees again and again were requesting, can you see the king? If you don't see the king, you know, he's going to give up his body. He's going to give up the kingdom. Mahaprabhu wasn't concerned about that. So how is this? You know, it's a similar, you know, you see there in this situation, he's demonstrating the very strict principles of sannyas. So that's why he didn't want to see the king. Eventually, the king becomes a great, he shows so much mercy on the king. So Mahaprabhu, he has different objectives. You know, he wants to, once he's taken sannyas, then he becomes a lot stricter in areas like this. Similarly, you know, there were devotees in Mayapur that were rejected, like Gopal Chapal, and another one was Devananda Pandit. So they were rejected. Even Gopal Chapal, he came to Mahaprabhu. He offended Srivas Thakur. He came to Mahaprabhu and he said, please deliver me. Mahaprabhu said, no, you rascal. This is just the beginning of your suffering. He'd been wandering for several years in the Navadip area with leprosy, rejected. And Mahaprabhu said, no, this is just the beginning of your suffering. You're going to suffer for millions of years like this. So then eventually, about 5 years later, when Mahaprabhu actually, after this, as we'll describe, not 5 years later, it's 4 years later, when he actually goes to Ramkelli, he goes through Bengal, and at that time he delivers many of these offenders. So he does deliver them. So in this case, you know, Kala Krishna Das, he was rejected because Mahaprabhu, the standard of being the secretary and the personal associate of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has to be very high, and he was carried away, and he wasn't actually even going to come back. He was going to leave Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu had to personally go and retrieve him from the gypsies. You know, and then there was a fight, and then there was a whole scene. So then Mahaprabhu, he carried on to the end of the South Indian tour, but then he said, you take him away because it's his mood as a strict sannyasi. But the person wasn't completely rejected. That's the whole point. And therefore we sing that Parama Karuna Bahu Duijon. Nitai Gaura Chandra. Bahu Duijon means these two personalities together. Nitai Gaur. Parama Karuna. So there's quite a few examples where you see that Sachinandan, Mahaprabhu, Gaudhari, he's very strict. But Nityananda Prabhu, he intervenes and he, through Nityananda Prabhu, mercy is received. That was the case Jagai and Madhai. Mahaprabhu already invoked the Sudarshan Chakra. He was going to cut the head off Madhavananda, and Lord Nityananda Prabhu stopped him and appealed to him. Similarly with Pratapuruja Maharaj, Lord Nityananda Prabhu mediated and he intervened in major ways in order to get the mercy, the king to get the mercy. And in this case also, KRSNA, as Lord Nityananda Prabhu suggested, we need to send somebody to Mayapur to inform all the devotees who are completely distressed and completely devastated that Mahaprabhu just left and they haven't got any news. So we need to inform them that Mahaprabhu has returned from South India, and so let's engage KRSNA Das, and that way he can be inspired and engaged, and he's not completely rejected. But he no longer, carried on in the service as the personal servant of Mahaprabhu. But he wasn't rejected; he was delivered and he was cared for by the devotees who were acting as the instruments of Mahaprabhu. We know that was also the desire of Mahaprabhu, but acting as a very formal mood as the sannyasi, then he wanted to demonstrate very strict high standards in this regard, particularly in regard for the renunciates. Any other questions up to this point? Okay, let's carry on. So then, the king, he's there in the palace, and this news had come that 200 devotees have arrived from Mayapur, from Navadip. And the king says, Mahaprabhu Ragan, Jota, Oilo, Gouda Hoite. All of those devotees of Mahaprabhu who have come from Gouda, who've come from Bengal, Bhattacharya, he's asking Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Eke, Dekha Amate, you show them to me. Dekha, you show me, you tell me who they are. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he replied, well, I've been away from Mayapur, from Bengal. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he's also Bengali, but he left and he was residing in Puri, teaching Nyaya and personal philosophy. He said, I don't know who these devotees are because it's been several decades since I've been in Mayapur, but Gopinathacharya, brother-in-law, he knows them all. So he can he can tell you who they are. So they all went up onto the roof of the palace, and there they could see, I'm not sure if that's possible now from the Jagannath Puri temple and from the palace of the king, whether you can see Narendra Sarovar now. I mean, even in the time of Mahaprabhu, from the Siddha Bakula, where Haridas Thakur stays, you could see the chakra on the top of the temple, but I don't think you can see the chakra on the top of the temple now from the Siddha Bakula. So Puri is different now, but in those days, you could see all the way over to Narendra Sarovar. And so they went on the roof, and then Gopinathacharya, he began describing. Now we'll spend a little bit of detail on this because this is interesting, that we'll see the way, what we're seeing here is where, particularly with a text like the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which it's called a Rasa Shastra, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Rasa Shastra, Bhakti Shastra, because it is very much, Chaitanya Charitamrita particularly is very much focused on the loving relationships that the Lord has with his devotees. It's a very predominant, and Srimad Bhagavatam similarly is focusing on the relationships that the Lord has with his devotees. Although in Srimad Bhagavatam there are other topics as well, like there's creation, There's the various avatars described of Krishna. There's the kings, dynasties of the kings described in Srimad Bhagavatam. There's 10 topics like that. It's called Mahapurana, Srimad Bhagavatam. You won't find all of these topics described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. You'll find that it's focusing particularly on the Bhakti Rash, on the relationships that the Lord has with his devotees. And there's a predominant theme here, particularly in the the conclusions of the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that his affection for the Gaudiya for bhaktas, the Bengali devotees. Mahaprabhu has got great affection for them and great appreciation for them. And this theme will appear again and again, even in this brief seminar that we're giving to you over the next few weeks, that Mahaprabhu's attachment to the devotees from Bengal is very strong. And, when you consider that Mahaprabhu's life, he spent 48 years on the planet. He spent 6 years traveling and preaching, and he spent 18 years in Jagannath Puri, and he spent 24 years in Navadip. So the majority of Mahaprabhu's life was spent in Navadip, and the deep relationships that he developed and enjoyed with the Navadip Bashis, who are all his eternal associates from Vrindavan. Brajendra Nandana Jai Shachi Shuta Hoilo She Balarama Hoilo Netai. Just as the son of the king of Braj has become the son of Sachimata, and Lord Balaram has become Nityananda Prabhu, so similarly all of the devotees of Vrindavan that we see, Krishna's associates in Vrindavan, they all appeared in Navadip Leela in different forms to associate. Gaurangya Shongi Gone, Nita Shidha Koni Mone. They're all eternal associates of Krishna from Vrindavan. So the Navadip Basis and the relationships that Mahaprabhu has with the Navadip devotees, that's the same as the relationship Krishna has with the Brajabasis. And so, the specific affection, and in this case, we'll see the respect and the reverential appreciation that Mahaprabhu has for the devotees in Bengal is demonstrated by the detail with which Kaviraj Goswami now describes their arrival. He describes their arrival in Puri in great detail, and he enumerates many of the important loving devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and just by hearing their names, we're purified. By hearing their names. In fact, on many occasions in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Goswami will include a long list of names of devotees. And just by hearing the names of these devotees, we are purified. Because these are the eternal associates of Vrindavan. So he begins to describe that Damodar Shrarup Govinda, Duijon. So these two people are very significant persons here. Damodar Swarup is Swarup Damodar. That's Mahaprabhu's secretary. And Govinda is his personal servant. So Duijon means these two people. Duijon. Damodar Swarup is one and Govinda is the other. Duijon. Now these, you could say, are the most intimate representatives of Mahaprabhu. So he's sending his very intimate representatives, his personal secretary and his personal servant. He's sending them to greet the devotees who've just come from Bengal. And we can also learn many things about Gaudiya Vaishnava culture from these descriptions in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he sent those two devotees, Mala Prashad Lai Jai Jahan Vaishnavgan. So they took the mala, means the garland, and the prashadam of Lord Jagannath. Mala Prashad Lai means taking the prashadam of Lord Jagannath and the garlands of Lord Jagannath. Lai, taking that, Jai Jahan Vaishnavgan, they went to the place where all of the Bengali devotees had assembled at Narendra Sarovar. Raj Kohe, the king said, Raj Kohe, Jar Mala Dilo Duijon, Ashcharya Teja, Boro Mahan Kaha Konjon. So that he's asking, the king's asking that Jar Mala Dilo Duijon, those two devotees who to whom they gave the garlands and the prasadam, Ashcharya Teja. He's very brilliant. Ashcharya Teja means he's brilliant. The Ashcharya means astounding effulgence. Ashcharya Teja. Boro Mahant. He's a great soul. Who is that person that they gave the garlands and the prasad to? Kaha Konjon. You tell me, who is that person? That person was Advaita Acharya, who was the leader of the Vaishnavas. So this is very interesting. We can learn, how to receive a Vaishnava, And consider that these devotees, they'd come from Bengal, they'd traveled for more than a month. It's not that they could just jump on a domestic flight or even jump on a train. They walked. They walked from Mayapur to Jagannath Puri. And that's 1 month it took them. And of course, as we'll see, they were doing Sankirtan all the way. Now they've just arrived in Jagannath Puri. They've just arrived. So the moment of reception is very important in society, in culture, and particularly in Vaishnava culture. The moment of reception. Going through the Srimad Bhagavatam, you'll see so many elaborate receptions when Krishna arrives in Dwarka, when Vidura arrives after his tour, after his pilgrim's tour, he arrives back in Hastinapur. The details to which such persons are received is very important. So here, the Mahaprabhu he's sharing his affection. He is sending his two very intimate servants with Jagannath Prasadam and a garland of Lord Jagannath. And in this way, he's welcoming Mahaprabhu. He's welcoming the devotees. And those offerings of welcoming, those gifts, are offered to the senior most person in the group. It's kind of I don't know, it's a bit of a I don't know if it's a communist thing or a socialist thing or even a democratic thing or a somehow modern way of thinking that we kind of consider everybody equal, and let's not just have exclusivity and focus everything on the privileged class. Let's make it equal for everybody. But this is a social value, communist value, popular thing nowadays. But actually, it's not proper. In this case, the whole of that group of people are shown respect. It's not that you just pick out anybody randomly and show them the respect, because we're all equal and we're social values here, and we don't want to have elite privilege of the high class. No, it is all gross. It's all mundane understanding. The respect of every individual in the group is expressed by honoring the senior person. Honoring the one senior person, that shows your respect to the whole group, because he's the representative of the whole group and he's the leader of the whole group. So in this way, the garland and the Mahaprasad were offered to Advaita Acharya, and in this way the whole group was honored. So Gopinath Acharya, he begins to reply, and he begins to give some commentary, some description on all of these exalted devotees. Acharya Kohe, that's Gopinath Acharya. He says, Acharya Kohe, Iha Nam Advaita Acharya, his name is Advaita Acharya. The king asked, who did he give the garland and the prasad to? Iha Nam Advaita Acharya, his name is Advaita Acharya. Mahaprabhu Mandapatta, he is the recipient of great respect from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sharva Shiro Darja, and he is the most respectable. Siro, in other words, Siro Darja means the jewel on the head. Shiro means the head. He's the most respectable of all the Vaishnavas. And now he begins to enumerate the other devotees as well. Srivash Pandit Iha, Pandit Bakreshwar, Vidyanidhi Acharya Iha, Pandit Gadadhar. This Ihar and Inha means this is that person. That person is there. So you can see the names. We don't need to give translation. Srivas Pandit, Pandit Bakreshwar, Vidyanidhi Acharya, Pandit Gadadhar. Acharya Iha, Pandit Purandar, Gangadas Pandit Iha, Pandit Shankar. there is Gangadas, there is Pandit Shankar, there is Murari Gupta, there's Pandit Narayan, Haridas Thakur, Bhuvana Pavan, there's Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur comes at this time to Jagannath Puri, and he remains there. Basically, we'll see that Haridas Thakur doesn't, he hardly leaves Mahaprabhu's association after this event. Mahaprabhu, he was in Navadip, Haridas Thakur, he was associating with Mahaprabhu and the devotees. He was already in the area before Mahaprabhu began his Sankirtan pastimes. And Mahaprabhu took sannyas, went on South Indian tour just with one associate, Krishna Das, Haridas Thakur, Nityananda Prabhu, no one else was there. Nityananda Prabhu, already you'll see that Nityananda Prabhu's name is not in this list because he was already in Puri. But Haridas Thakur came at that time, and then he accompanied Mahaprabhu to Ramkeli, and then Mahaprabhu went to Vrindavan alone, but then Mahaprabhu remained in Jagannath Puri, and Haridas Thakur remained there with him. And Haridas Thakur eventually left even before Mahaprabhu. So it's Hari Bhatta, Nrsingananda, Vasudev Datta, and Shivananda, Govinda Madhav, A Bashu Ghosh, Tin Bhai Kirtan Prabhu Payan Shantosh. These three brothers are there, Govinda Madhav and Vasu Ghosh. A Tin Bhai means three brothers, Tin Bhai, three brothers. So their kirtan, Kirtan A means by their kirtan. Prabhu Payan Shantosh. Mahaprabhu he liked their kirtan so much. This is very interesting that, first of all, these devotees are publicly referred to as kirtaniyas, and publicly and mentioned, particularly this, this aspect of their service was very much pleasing to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that they perform kirtan, and that's publicly known, it's publicly stated that they're so we can serve Mahaprabhu in different ways. You can specialize. In this case, Govinda Madhav and Vasu Ghosh, these three brothers, they specialized in kirtan. Some devotees specialize in cooking. Some devotees specialize in lecturing. Some devotees specialize in organizing and leading. Some devotees specialize in kirtan. Some devotees specialize in puja. So that's quite acceptable to have a specialization in your service. Of course, we do all the basic things. We associate, we take prasad and worship the deity, chant Shakar Sharan Shrestha Epachanga, but particularly you can focus. And Mahaprabhu liked that. He liked their kirtan. So that's interesting. And they're mentioned as being kirtaniyas. Raghav Pandit, Acharya Nandan, Shriman Pandit, Shrikanta, Narayan, Suklambara, Sridhar, Bijoy, Balab Sain, Purushatam Sanjay. All the devotees, as we mentioned, they're all mentioned, their names. He takes Kaviraj Goswami. He doesn't just say, oh, and a big bunch of them, and they all just rolled up, and that was really cool. No, because they're all exalted, eternal associates of Krishna, and now they've assumed different forms as Brahman Vaishnavas, Bengali Brahman Vaishnavas, and he's mentioning all of their names for our purification. Kulinagram Bashi, a Satyaraj Khan, this resident of Kulinagram, Satyaraj Khan. Ramananda Adi, a Deki Vidyaman. All of the residents of Kulinagram were there with Satyaraj Khan, beginning with Ramananda Adi, a Deki Vidyaman. They're all present there. Mukunda Das, Narahari, Sri Raghunandan, Kandabashi, Chiranjeev, Arshulochan. The Kandabasi, the resident of Kanda, Chiranjeev, as well as the others are all mentioned. So now the king, he's on the roof of the palace, and he's hearing this description of all the exalted devotees that have come from Jagannath Puri, from Navadip, and they're being received by Govinda and Sarup Damodar, Mahaprabhu's two personal associates. And now the king, he begins to speak. Raja Kahe, the king says, Deki, more hoile chamatkar. I'm amazed. More hoile chamatkar. I'm completely astounded. Vaishnav Ache Teja Deki Nahira. I've never seen such effulgent devotees. Vaishnav Ache Teja Deki Nahira. I've never seen such teja, such brilliance. Now, as we mentioned, as we mentioned, these devotees, they're all special devotees, and they're performing kirtan. Their arrival, it's not like our arrival. We kind of cruise in and we say, where's the key to my room? Is it ready? I'm hungry and need to. Nothing like that. They're doing kirtan the whole way. They're doing kirtan. They're chanting the whole way, the whole month. That's how they travel. Not like us, call the taxi. I want the back seat. I want the front seat. Where's my luggage? Let's stop. Let's get a drink. They're completely absorbed in kirtan the whole way. Many instances will see that these journeys that the devotees are performing, they're not just walking or traveling. They're doing kirtan, mridangas, the whole thing. So they arrive and they're doing in kirtan, and then he's completely astonished. The king is completely astonished. Koti shurya sham shab ujjala varan. Just like 1,000, just like a koti means 10,000. 10,000 suns. Kota shurya, koti shurya. Summer, like 10,000 suns, ujjala varan, their effulgence, their brilliance. Kwabunahi shuni a modhur kirtan. But never, not only are they extremely brilliant in their bodily effulgence, but they're modhur kirtan. Nahi shuni, Kobu, at any time, nahi shuni, I haven't heard a modhur kirtan, this such sweet kirtan. In his purports to these verses, Srila Prabhupada, he comments that, the king of Puri, he would see so many kirtan parties. Even now, when you go to Jagannath Puri, you'll see so many devotees on the Grand Road doing kirtan. Maybe not so much right now. Pandemic, probably won't see so much. Even in Mayapur, when you come to Maya, you won't believe the state of Mayapur. The main road in Mayapur, you can't believe it's just like falling apart, derelict. All the shops, and they're just all falling apart. The roads just all potholes. There's no one coming. It's 6 months. It's just all falling apart. The temple's closed at the moment, a few days. No one's coming. Mayapur, you can't believe it. The main road, it's just everyone's packed up and going to their villages. It's just, so anyway, so many people would come to Mayapur, so many people come to Puri, not at the moment, but the point was Prabhupada's making that the king, he saw so many kirtan parties. And he'd never seen a kirtan party like this. So once again, through the words of the king, first we were hearing through the mouth of Gopinath Acharya, we were hearing the respectful description of these devotees coming from Navadip, Bengal. And now, Kaviraj Goswami, he's using the person of the king, which is very significant. I mean, what the king says, what the king does, what the king feels, this is very significant. Yad yad acharati shrestha, yad yad acharati shrestha, tatat evet tarojana shayat pramanam kurute lokashtat anavarchate. The example of a leader like a king has an influence on the whole of the society. So just like you'll see the pop stars and the musicians and the famous movie stars, everyone will have the haircut like them. Like there became a Sachin Tendulkar haircut, if you know about Indian cricket. Sachin Tendulkar. So he had his haircut. So that became standard haircut for all Indian men. So anyway, this is the principle. Lokastat Anavartate Sayat Pramanam. On the example of a leader, all the people follow. So Kaviraj Goswami, through the lips of the king, he's explaining the exalted nature of Mahaprabhu's Gaudiya Bhakta devotees and the Mahaprabhu, the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement. The Gaudiya Vaishnava movement really is coming to Puri now with this group of devotees. And the king is glorifying them. The king is appreciating their unique features, their incomparable features. So through the lips of the king, this glorification of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas becomes more and more enhanced, more and more emphasized, because the king himself is glorifying them. Ache Prem, Ache Nritta, Ache Hari Dhani, Kaha Naha Deki, Ache Kaha Nahi Shuni. Ache Prem, such love. Ache Prem, in other words, he's looking at the way that they're doing kirtan. Ache Prem, this love. Ache Nritta, this dancing. Ache Hari Dhani, this calling out. Hari Dhani means the sound. The Dhani means the sound. the calling out of the Lord's names. Kaha naha deki. Kaha nahi deki. I've never seen. Prabhupada's commenting that the king of Puri, he's seeing hundreds of kirtan performances every day, but he's never seen kirtan like this because it's full of prema. It's full of love. It's genuine. It's not professional. It's simply based on genuine love of Krishna and Sachin. I've never seen Kahan Nahi Deki Ache Kahan Nahi Shuni. I've never seen such kirtan. I've never heard such kirtan, nor have I ever heard about such kirtan. And then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he responds. Bhattacharya kohe, hey Modura Vachan, Chaitanya Shrishti, hey Prem Shankirtan. No, they can't see me do that. It's too much dark. In the picture Deka Jabena. Bhattacharya kohe, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he replied, hey Modur Vachan, this sweet sound, Chaitanya Shrishti, is creation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This Prem Shankirtan, this is called Prem Shankirtan. Actually, on the authority of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, we can refer to ourselves as the Prem Shankirtan movement. The Prem Shankirtan movement. This is the Prem Shankirtan. This is Chaitanya Shrishti. This type of Sankirtan, the king, he saw so many types of Sankirtan on the streets of Puri. But this type of Sankirtan, in Modur Bhachan, this sweet chanting, is Chaitanya Shrishti, is created by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's called Prem Shankirtan. Actually, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did create our Shankirtan. He did create our Shankirtan, and as Thakur Bhaktivinoda sings that Mridanga Baddha Shunita Moy Abhashara Shara Jache Gauda Bihita Kirtana Shuni Ridoy Ananda Nache Gauda Bihita Kirtan. That's translated by Srila Prabhupada as the authorized kirtans of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he authorized two kirtans particularly. The Chaitanya Shrishti, Prem Shankirtan. That means two things. That means the chanting of the 16 name, 32 syllable, 16 names, Hare Krishna Mahamantra. That's one type of Chaitanya Shrishti Prem Shankirtan. And the other type of Chaitanya Shrishti Prem Shankirtan is the chanting of Haraye Nama Krishna Yadhavaya Namaha Gopal Govindaram Sri Madhusudan. These two lines, Prabhupada comments, are particularly favored by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we'll see there's several occasions described in the Chaitanya Bhagavat where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually, he preached this mantra, Haraya Nama Krishna, just like when his students, when he came back from Gaya, and his students requested, can you teach us how to perform Sankirtan? At that time, Mahaprabhu taught them to chant Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Gopal Govindaram Sri Madhusudan. And Prabhupada comments that this is another form of the Mahamantra. He says, another form, it's not sung as much as it should be. It's another form. We'll sing all types of mantras along with the kirtan. Even Jai Prabhupada, Nitai Gaur Haribol, those are not actually mentioned by Prabhupada in his books anyway to chant. Jaya Prabhupada, but we do that. Nitai Gaur Haribol, they're not mentioned anywhere in Prabhupada's writings, but they've become fashion in India. But Prabhupada does mention that we should chant this mantra, Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Gopal Govindaram Sri Madhusudan. He says we should chant this, he says particularly in Mayapur. He says it's non-different from the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So in any case, this is the Chaitanya Shrishti Prem Shankirtan that so much impressed Pratapuruja Maharaj. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya continues that Avatari Chaitanya Koilo Dharma Prachar Kali Kale Dharma Krishna Nam Shankirtan Kali Pracharan. So Avatari Chaitanya, the incarnation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is to propagate the Yuga Dharma, Kaile Dharma Prachar, and Kali Kale in the time of Kali Yuga, this Kali Kale Dharma, the religious process, is Krishna Nam Shankirtan. So at this time, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, you see here's Jagannath Puri, and here all the Bengali devotees have arrived. There's Harirash Thakur with the beard, Advaita Acharya. And at this time, Pratabhuja Maharaj, he introduces the Chaitanya avatar to Sarvabhauma Bhatta, to King Pratabhuja, the king of Puri, one of the most influential persons in India, king of Puri. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who had already been delivered by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he first arrived in Jagannath Puri. He's convinced, he's completely convinced. He became such a devotee. And now he is explaining the avatar of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, acting as the Vartma Pradashaka Guru, Shikha Guru of the king. He's explaining to him that this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who is here in Jagannath Puri, and these are his associates, he's avatar. He's the Yuga avatar. He's Krishna who's appearing in this Yuga and the Yuga Dharma for this age is the Krishna Nam Sankirtan. And in this way, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya informs the king of the significance of the Chaitanya avatar, who he actually is, and the importance of his incarnation. Now, we heard the description, go back, well, we heard this description of the Bengali devotees arriving in Jagannath Puri for the first time to associate with Mahaprabhu. They're arriving now. This is at the time of the Anuvarsha, when the Snan Yatra has been completed. So these Bengali devotees have arrived just before Rath Yatra, a few days before Rath Yatra. Perhaps it was somewhat of a coincidence the first time, because they came because Mahaprabhu had just returned. But now we're going to see the Bengali devotees. They will participate in Rath Yatra. They will celebrate Rath Yatra with Mahaprabhu. And that is described in great detail by Kaviraj Goswami. We'll come back to that a little later, how here he describes that in great detail. But this description, a motto, in the same that here Kaviraj Goswami is explaining that a motto means that a motto means that in this way, the way that I've just described, all of these Bengali devotees arriving, a motto in the same way, pratabda. Pratabda means every year. Pratabda means every year. Ashay, go there, Bhaktagan. Go there means from Bengal, Bhaktagan, the devotees, they came. So as we heard this detailed description this first time, where all their names are mentioned and the prasadam and the mala is sent, in the same way every year they arrived and they were received. But Kaviraj Goswami, they came another, you could say more than 20 times, more than 20 years subsequently, every year they came. But Kaviraj Goswami, he doesn't again describe in the detailed way that he did the first time. But he says here that in the same way, they came every year. And so we can understand that the same type of reception was experienced. And Prabhu Shonge Rohi, Prabhu kept them in his association. Kore Jatra Darshan. And they witnessed every year, they came at that time and they saw the Rath Yatra ceremony with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in the same way that this is chapter 11 of Madhya Lila. So in the same way that chapter 12, 13, 14, and 15 of Madhya Lila, they describe the Rath Yatra festival in great detail. Now, that happened every year, but Kaviraj Goswami, he only describes it in detail one time, this first time. And we can understand that subsequently every year, the same ceremonies and the same Mahaprabhu pastimes with the devotees performing kirtan, Rath Yatra, in the way that it's described in the first year. That's described, that happened every year for the subsequent 20 years or so. And they all came every year. Prabhu Sri Charane, the devotees from Bengal, they took shelter of Prabhu. Prabhu Sri Charane means Prabhu's lotus feet. Prabhu Kripakori, and Mahaprabhu was merciful upon them. Shabai Rakula Nijasthane, he allowed them to live with him. Nijasthane means with him, intimately with him in Jagannath Puri. So at this point, if there are any questions, we can take a few, if there's any questions on the arrival of the devotees in Jagannath Puri.
Yes, Prabhu, I have one question, please.
Is that a question? Can you repeat? I didn't hear.
Yeah, I have one question.
Yeah, please.
Concerning when you mention about being expertise in service, in different services, in puja, in cooking, in other services, that they are all the same thing. So my question is, if a devotee is expertise in different services, how can the management engage him in the most important service where he'll be
well, I was making the point. I was making that point that these three brothers, that's Basu Ghosh, Mukunda Ghosh, and the other one, I'm forgetting their names. These three brothers, Govinda, thank you. Yeah, their kirtan pleased the Lord. So therefore, manage means that let's do the things that please the Lord. So it's mentioned that their kirtan was very pleasing. Tade kirtan Prabhu Payan Santosh.
Sorry, let us be patient with Prabhu. I think his internet got disconnected. So let us wait for him.
Sorry, we had a storm here, and so I lost the Wi-Fi, and now I'm on my phone. So we'll carry on the phone SIM card. And I think we're sharing screen. I have to do that again. So we'll carry on. Yeah. So we were discussing about management. Yeah. Well, in this case, it's mentioned that the Lord liked their kirtan. So let's do the things. Let's manage things in the way that the Lord likes. So those who are good at cooking, let them cook. Those who are good at kirtan, let them do kirtan. Of course, that may not be all the time able to manage. Sometimes you have to do the needful, and then you just do. You may not even be good at it. But we're just making the point that such specialization, we generally see it can be facilitated in a community when there's a larger community of devotees. When you have a larger community of devotees, then you can have this type of specialization. Like, for example, here in Mayapur, we have a lot of devotees. And so devotees can focus on one seva. Many devotees doing puja, many devotees just doing teaching, many devotees just doing cooking. That's fine. But in a smaller temple, you may not have that luxury. You may, have to do many things. Some things you may be good at and you like, other things you may not be so good at and you don't like, but you have to do them anyway. So that may be the situation in a smaller center, but in a larger center, then specialization is good, because the devotees who are good at a particular thing, they can become better. And so that was reflected in that statement which we shared. Other questions on the arrival of the devotees? Okay.
Yes, but I want one more observation or question.
Yeah.
How come all the devotees, you said they came like 10,000 of them, and they comes every year? Are they all from the same city, or like they come from the whole?
So there's not 10,000. No, what he said there was 1,000. The king said that their brilliance is like 10,000 suns, but there is only 200. It mentions there's 200 of them. That group of devotees coming from Bengal, there's 200 devotees there.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're not all from the same place, as was mentioned. Some of them are from Kulinagram, some of them are from a place called Kanda, so Satyaraj Kanda, different places. But Shivananda Sain, he's one devotee, he was like tour organizer. So he would have communicated with the devotees from the different places and arranged each year, you come, we all meet, and then we all journey together. But there was 200, and the first time there was 200. Subsequent years, there may have been more. So they came every year like that. They came at that time, and then they stayed in Jagannath Puri for 4 months for the whole Chaturmasya period. Chaturmasya begins around Rath Yatra. They stayed, and then they returned back after 4 months. And they did that every year. So it took them a month to travel and a month to return, and they stayed in Puri for 4 months. So that's 6 months. So subsequent to this incident, basically the devotees from Navadip, from Bengal, they spent half of their year going and coming for the Rath Yatra festival in association of Mahaprabhu. That half of their year was given for that, for the remainder of Mahaprabhu's presence on the planet.
Okay, thank you very much, Prabhu. I have further questions. Okay.
Another question?
Yes. You spoke about Alananath.
Yeah.
When the Lord Jagannath is quarantined for 14 days.
Yeah.
Lord Chaitanya goes to Alananath and he paid obeisances on the rock, and the rock melted.
Yeah.
Is that due to the love of God that was melting the rock, or just some mystical energy?
Yeah, love of God. Well, particularly, specifically, Kaviraj Goswami says it was due to his feelings of separation. It's due to his feelings of separation. It's called the Prem Shila. And it mentions Gopi Bhave Birahai. In the mood of separation like that of the gopis, when Krishna leaves in the Rasa Lila. So that's his mood, and therefore it melted the stone.
Could you show the picture again? We want to take a picture of that wonderful Prem Shila.
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you.
All right. Thank you.
I'll send it to you. Okay, so we can wind up a few more points we'll make. A motto Mahaprabhu char botchor gelo dokin joy ashte dui botchor lagila. So this verse is saying that now char botchor, you see this chari botchor gelo, that means 4 years have gone. A motto Mahaprabhu chari botchor gelo, 4 years have gone since his sannyas. Dokin joy aste, Dokin means South India. Jai Ashte means to go and come back. Dui Botshore, that took 2 years. Dui Botshore, this Batsar means a year. Dui Botshore. So 2 years to South Indian tour. And then he came back, and our Dui Botshore, another 2 years. Chahe Brindavan Jeti. He remained in Puri after coming from now on, he come back from South India. He remains in Puri for 2 years more. But constantly he was desiring to go to Vrindavan. Vrindavan Jaite. Ramananda Hate Prabhu Na Pare Chalite. But Ramananda Roy and Pratapruja Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and the devotees in Puri, they didn't allow Mahaprabhu to leave again to go to Vrindavan. They kept him in Jagannath Puri. And they gave various excuses. Like, for example, just briefly, here's the chapters of Chaitanya Charitamrita from chapter 7 to chapter 19, which take us up to. So this is interesting, that that 2 years, the South Indian tour, and the Lord's coming back, that 2 year tour, that's one chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita. One chapter in 2 years, chapter 7. And then this period here of chapters 11 to chapter 14, that's only 20 days. So you can see that on occasion, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he's speaking in a very general way, like the South Indian tour. is he covers a few main points in a 2-year period. He covers in, and half of that is 2 chapters on the South Indian tour. 1 chapter is Teachings to Ramananda Roy. That's chapter 8, and then chapter 9 is Lord during the holy places. So that whole 2-year period is covered in 1 chapter. And chapters 11 or chapter 10 to 14, that's only a 20-day period. So you can see that on occasion, Kaviraj Goswami, he goes into great detail and describes events very great detail and very great clarity. And other occasions, he describes events more in a broader, less detailed way, and he changes from one to the other. And similarly, the remaining 2 years after returning from South India, and then this 20 days where the Rath Yatra festival was performed, and then subsequently he remains in Puri another two years. So that's 4 years. 4 years have gone, and then the remaining 2 years, all of these events happened in the first visit, the first time, that all the way to Chatumasha. And then again the next year, the Bengali devotees arrive. There's Rath Yatra, so there's 1 year gone. And then Mahaprabhu was constantly requesting, and then they're saying, no, it'll be too cold. And then first of all, they said stay for the next year when the devotees come again. And then after that, the second year, it'll be too cold, wait more. And then wait the next year for Gopranima. And then the devotees came again, so they came 3 times. And in that year, 2 years passed in Jagannath Puri. The devotees came 3 times. First time, then 1 year passed, they came again, and then another year passed, and then they came again. So in that way, they came 3 times. And then eventually, they gave Mahaprabhu permission to leave for Vrindavan. So you can see the overall pastimes of Mahaprabhu, they look like this. Navadvip Leela was 24 years. And the Madhya Leela was 6 years. And the remaining Antya Leela is Mahaprabhu's remaining in Jagannath Puri, that's 18 years. And during the Madhya Leela, in a 6-year period, during the Madhya Leela, is when Mahaprabhu, he travels extensively. A Madhya Leela Nam, Leela Mukhya Dham, which means, the Mukhya means the principal pastimes. Kaviraj Goswami says that although the Madhya Leela is the shortest, it's only a 6-year period compared to 24 years in Navadvip and 18 years in Puri. The 6-year period of the Madhya Leela, Kaviraj Goswami, he calls that Mukhya, Leela Mukhya, which means the principal pastimes. And that's because Mahaprabhu, he distributes love of Godhead extensively during that 6-year period. And in this way, the 6 years of the Madhya Leela are described. 2 years South Indian tour, and then 2 years in Puri, and then actual Vrindavan, going to Vrindavan and instructing Rupa and Sanatan, that also took 2 years. So this is the Madhya Leela. And you'll find that these topics are what Prabhupada wrote in the Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Prabhupada wrote in 1968, and he wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita in 1973. So he wrote the Teachings of Lord Chaitanya well before that, even before second canto and subsequent cantos. Prabhupada wrote Teachings of Lord Chaitanya in order to give the world this Mukhya Leela, this Madhya Leela, this Mahaprabhu's traveling and preaching and distributing love of Godhead. And the three main journeys that he made is a Bengali map, an ancient Bengali map. It's describing the gold Brahman, the first one, and that's the bold dark blue, and then Dokhin and Pashchim Bharat Brahman means South Indian tour, and then Vrindavan tour. So there's three trips. From Puri, Mahaprabhu goes back to Bengal and then Ramkali and then returns. First trip is the South Indian tour. Sorry, come back to that map. First trip is down South Indian tour. Comes back to Puri. That's 2 years. And then Mahaprabhu attempts to go to Vrindavan. He goes back to Bengal. That's up there in Ramkali. We'll describe that in the next session. and comes back from Ram Kelly because Sanatan Goswami says there's too many people with you. It's not the way to go to Vrindavan. So Mahaprabhu accepts that, comes back to Jagannath Puri, and then the actual journey to Vrindavan, he goes through the forest of Jharkhand, and there, on the way back from Vrindavan, he meets Rupa and Sanatan Goswami, and we'll be discussing the Rupashika in a subsequent session. Madhalila Korilon A Dig Darshan Choi Botchor Koilo Jache Gamon Agamon. Thus I've given a summary description of the Madhalila, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's travels to and from Jagannath Puri. Indeed, the Lord traveled to and from continuously for 6 years. So we described a little bit about the journeys that Mahaprabhu made during that 6-year period of the Madhalila. And we'll be discussing more of that in detail in the subsequent sessions. A few minutes left. If there's any couple of questions, a question or two.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Haribol.
In viewing the lecture and the present day practice of Krishna consciousness, my mind is a little bit introspecting. These devotees in Chaitanya Lila, they don't seem to have come from any particular temple. They are not like temple resident devotees. So the mood of practice at that time and the mood of practice now, where devotional service is more of temple practice thing, there seems to be a need to evaluate the advantage of performance when there is no temple structure and the advantage of performance when there's temple structure. I wouldn't know if you can throw a little light.
Yeah, sure. No, so it's a very good observation. And it's absolutely correct that these devotees, they're all householders and they're all maintaining themselves. And they're all devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's no institute. Like now we have an institute and we have properties and we have organization. There was no such thing. Mahaprabhu had followers and they were intimate associates. There were some brahmacharis, some sannyasis. And in Puri, there are some sannyasis. They're all accommodated by the king, by Pratabhuja Maharaj, and they make arrangement. But there's no like organization with, leadership and strategic planning or anything like that. So yeah, it's different. So these things we're following in ISKCON now because Prabhupada established these things. He wanted an organization with temples, properties, assets, leadership, planning, regulations to follow. Prabhupada established all of those things so that we can organize the preaching. So in Mahaprabhu's time, such organized institutional preaching didn't exist. It was simply Mahaprabhu and his associates, and they were all independent householders and a few sannyasis that were maintained by the king of Puri directly. Mahaprabhu was also maintained by the king pretty much, and by his followers. So yeah, it's but this we'll see that now already in the last few decades, ISKCON has already moved into a more of a congregation. When I joined the movement, we all lived in the temple. The householders also, there were no householders working. All of the householders lived around the temple in apartments given by the temple, and we all did Sankirtan. I mean, I was a brahmachari, but all the householders just did Sankirtan. But we don't see that in temples now. Temples, there's a few devotees live in the temples, a few, a handful generally in their temples. And most of the devotees live in their own, arrange their own, they're financially independent, they have jobs. And so we'll see that as the movement expands more and more and more, we'll see that most devotees in ISKCON by vast majority are financially independent and they're householders and they have their own careers. But still, the institutional direction and the cooperative way in which we all work together to spread Krishna consciousness, that's under the direction of the institutional leadership, and that's the way Prabhupada set it up, and that's obviously the most effective way because we can all work together we're not just little groups of followers of Mahaprabhu doing our thing here and there, we're all working together as a cooperative movement, international movement, and that gives the movement great strength and potency. And we've seen on so many occasions where our preaching all over the world, has greatly contributes and impacts and empowers the preaching in every respective center, because it's not just a separate little thing that's going on. It's a whole international movement, and that grades. Although on occasion there's sometimes trouble with administration and institutional issues, but we have to just tolerate that because of the benefits of all coming together and combine in a united way, planning and organizing our preaching to be like an army. We're not just like when you're under attack, you don't just kind of everyone for himself grab a weapon and do your best. We all come together, and people, there's organization, and people work in different ways as a cooperative unit to make the army more effective. So for that reason, Prabhupada established institute with institutional guidelines that we all follow, and in that way the preaching is much more effective.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, yeah. So yeah, I'm not such an institutional type of person, but we have to become, at least to the level required, because that way we all cooperate together and we preach, and that's important that devotees understand that. So there's room for individuality, and there's also important that we're also united. Both those things are important. Okay, so we'll conclude on that point. A little blessing for all of the people who heard this presentation. Eto Kohilo Prabhu Vaishnav Milon. I have described Kaviraj Goswami's.
Somebody want to ask a question, Prabhu?
Okay, it's up to you. It's okay with me. If you want to go on past the scheduled time, it's okay with me.
Yeah, please, Faguna Prabhu, please mute yourself and ask your question.
We still have time, or 30 minutes more.
No, we're finishing at 3. We had 1.5 hours. Not 2 hours, 1.5 hours. Take another question.
Faguna Prabhu, please unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. It's not getting it. Nobody's hearing you, Prabhu. Unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, you can
speak. Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
My question is, this whole idea of permitting the chariot to move, not allowing him to move, and eventually permitting him to move.
Yeah.
So with the understanding that Samaprabhu is Supreme Personality of Godhead, so what is this actually, what message is it actually passing?
The reason, obviously, I showed you that little slide there. They gave all the reasons, I mean, basically they just couldn't tolerate the idea of Mahaprabhu leaving. So Mahaprabhu, they made so many excuses why he should stay. So what we can learn from that, what message can we learn from that is that Mahaprabhu is acting as a devotee. He's not acting as God. He's acting as a sannyasi and a devotee. So he's indicating that even you might be the supreme God, but still, the blessings of a Vaishnava, the blessings of the Vaishnavas is very important. It's very weighty. So he felt obliged. They were able to control him. They were able to control him out of their love. So eventually, for that reason, that's the message, that the Lord becomes controlled by the love of a devotee. So he wanted to go to Vrindavan, but he didn't want to upset the devotees. They wanted him to stay, so he stayed. So that's his nature. He wants to please the devotees. And also we can learn from that a devotee, you shouldn't be whimsical and reckless. You should do things with the blessings of the appropriate Vaishnav, senior Vaishnavas. So that message also we can get. But we'll see. Okay, so he's God, but he's controlled by the love of his devotees. That's one thing. And the other thing is that as a sannyasi, as a Vaishnava, he didn't want to do anything without their blessings. That would be inauspicious. So he's waiting. So we'll see in the next session that he comes and he's saying that, I'm time and time I'm asking you, you're not giving me permission. and eventually they do agree, and we'll discuss that in the next session.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. So
Okay.
all the words, you can unmute yourself and let's chant 3 Hare Krishnas in
Okay,
appreciation.
there's a little, we'll just finish with this little blessing for everyone. Hey, Tokahila Prabhu Vaishnav Milan. Kaviraj Goswami is saying that I have described Prabhu and Vaishnav Milan, means the meeting of Prabhu and the Vaishnavas in Puri. I've described that, he says. Iha Jai Shune, those who hear this description, Pai Chaitanya Charan. Pai means they receive Chaitanya Charan. So Kaviraj Goswami has blessed us that anyone who hears this description of Lord Chaitanya arriving in, the Bengali devotees and Lord Chaitanya meeting in Jagannath Puri, they will get the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Wow.
Thank you all very much. Sachinandan Shri Gaudhari ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Ki jai ho. Ki jai
We invite you back same time next week, and we will carry on with Mahaprabhu's journey to Ram Kelly. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare
Hare
Krishna, Krishna
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Ram, Hare Ram,
Ram, Hare Hare. With grace, Actu Krishna Das Prabhuji ki jai ho.
Samabeta
Thank
Bhaktivinoda ki jai.
you.